Welcome aboard the Sacramento Southern Railroad, a part of the California State Railroad Museum. We're now departing the historic Central Pacific Passenger Station for a 45-minute round-trip excursion along the Sacramento River. I'm Dennis, your narrator, and along with our train crew, we'd like to welcome you on board. The people that helped you on board the train today are your car attendants, and we'll pause for just a moment so they can introduce themselves to you. So here to look out for your safety and answer your questions. In the event of an emergency, please follow their instructions. A conductor will come along shortly to punch your tickets, so please keep those handy. For safety reasons, please remain seated while the train's in motion. Passengers in the open-air cars may stand while holding onto those railings. But keep your hands and arms inside the train at all times, and don't lean out the windows. Remember, walking from one car to another while we're in motion is not permitted unless your car attendant gives you the okay. The cars that you're riding in today are over 75 years old. They're museum pieces, so please help us take care of them by keeping shoes off of the upholstered seats. With the exception of the first class car, eating on the train is not allowed, and water is the only beverage permitted. As we travel through the Old Sacramento waterfront, you will hear our engineers signaling the train's arrival at multiple locations by ringing the bell and blowing the horn. These sounds are pretty loud, especially if you have sensitivity to loud noises. So why do we do this? This is how the engineer communicates the train's location. It warns pedestrians and drivers that a train is approaching. This will continue as we pass through the waterfront and Tower Bridge areas. As our journey proceeds past these points, the horns and bells will become less frequent. So please sit back and enjoy the sights. Your car attendant can explain the history of the car that you're riding in today and also answer any of the questions that might come up while we're traveling along. Before the railroad tracks crisscrossed this region, the Sacramento River was the lifeline for goods and passengers traveling between here and San Francisco. Winding southward until it joins with the San Joaquin River, it eventually empties into the San Francisco Bay, creating a natural highway for commerce and connection. But by the late 1800s, things were changing fast. The Central Pacific Railroad, later known as the Southern Pacific Railroad, wasn't just laying down track. It also ruled the river until the Santa Fe Railroad began sending produce-filled steamboats down the river. Well, that didn't sit well with the Southern Pacific. They saw it as a territorial trespass and decided to outpace the riverboats by laying more rails. Enter the Sacramento Southern Railroad, launched in 1909. By 1929, the Walnut Grove branch line, the very track that we're riding on right now, stretched 33 miles to the town of Alton, deep within the Sacramento-San Joaquin Delta. What did it carry? Well, not passengers in those early days, but produce. Crates of celery, stalks of asparagus, and boxes of fresh fruits grown in these fertile delta soils were loaded up and shipped out to dining tables in places all over the country. Chicago, New York, Minneapolis, and more. Why was the Delta so fruitful? Because of the people. After the completion of the Transcontinental Railroad, nearly 10,000 Chinese immigrants who had helped to build the railroad found themselves out of work. Some returned to China, some joined other construction crews, but many stayed right here. These pioneers built bridges, drained marshes, and transformed wetlands into some of the richest farmland in the country. And they formed vibrant communities that supported the agricultural industry. They created a new California Gold Rush with agriculture. You can visit some of the historic towns, such as Locke and Hamilton, to learn more about these communities. The produce industry boomed between 1870 and 1900, and it couldn't have thrived without these workers. But when the Chinese Exclusion Act of 1882 cut off immigration, farm owners turned to other immigrant communities, such as the Japanese, Filipino, and Mexican communities, to help keep the Delta's fields first. Fast forward to the 1950s, two major forces spelled doom for this Walnut Grove branch railway. One was the 18-wheeler trucks with refrigerated trailers that made it faster and cheaper to ship by highway. And of course, Mother Nature came along and delivered the final blow to this particular rail line in 1972 when a levee failure and a devastating flood washed out large sections of this rail line. But history was not buried. When the Central Pacific Passenger Station in Old Sacramento was lovingly reconstructed in 1976, yeah, that's where you picked up your tickets today, by the way. This line sprang back into life. Not for freight, but for storytelling. After years of dedicated volunteering and training, the Sacramento Southern Excursion Train rolled out of the passenger station once again on June 2nd, 1984. And now, here we are, more than 40 years later, still chugging on strong. Throughout the decades, this line has welcomed more than 1 million school children and visitors just like you, offering rides through time on our historic rail cars and a front row seat for our railroad legacy along the Sacramento River. destination called Baths before I return back to Old Sacramento. Why is this spot called Baths? Well, Sacramento is a pretty warm place in the summertime, and before air conditioning, people like to cool off by taking a swim at the place that was called the Sacramento Riverside Baths, or simply Baths. Before the freeway was built, Baths were located close to our railroad tracks and operated from 1909 to 1955. When it opened, it was the only swimming pool bath complex within 50 miles of Sacramento, so it was a very popular place. Baths was exclusive and wasn't open to everyone, so many of the people who were not allowed access to Baths found a well-hidden swimming spot on the Sacramento River where the marina sits today. Well, folks, we have stopped at a location with multiple tracks called Miller Siding. Why have we stopped? Well, this is the spot where our engine moves to the front of the train. It's called the runaround, and this maneuver requires some precision, and it takes a few minutes, so we thank you in advance for your patience while we do this. In a moment, if you look out the windows on the freeway side of the train, you may be able to see the locomotive leaving the train. Here's what's happening. The locomotive disconnects or uncouples from the train, and our volunteer brakeman throws the switch, allowing the locomotive to travel onto the siding track that runs parallel to us. The locomotive today is the 2030, which is a diesel-electric locomotive built in 1951 that served in the Army for 40 years. When that locomotive comes by, be sure to give the crew a big wave. Well, we'll soon be returning to our point of origin in Old Sacramento. Today, the Old Sacramento waterfront is a favorite place for tourists and residents to visit and enjoy the restaurants, shops, and museums. But in the 19th century, this place was known as Sacramento City. In 1849, the world blessed the Sacramento City with one thought in mind: gold. Unfortunately, few people achieve their dreams of wealth by finding gold. The people who prospered the most were the ones who sold goods to the miners. successful merchant financed the plans for building the nation's first transcontinental railroad. They started building the Central Pacific Railroad right here in Old Sacramento and built east, where they joined with the tracks that were built by the Union Pacific Railroad at Promontory Summit, Utah, on May 10th of 1869. You can walk over and see the historic mile marker zero at the end of K Street in Old Sacramento. Well, railroading quickly became the driving force behind Sacramento's economy. As the demand for locomotives and rolling stock grew, the Central Pacific Railroad needed a place where heavy machinery could be built and maintained. Plans for such a facility began in 1862. The city of Sacramento and the state of California granted the railroad a large stretch of land at the city's northern end. Over decades, that land transformed into the massive Southern Pacific Railroad shops complex, an industrial hub that offered skilled jobs to thousands of workers. Today, we know the city as the rail yard. During World War II, as many as 7,000 workers employed there. Electricians, carpenters, draftsmen, pipe fitters, motor makers, and steel workers all found their place in the Sacramento rail yard. Women filled many of these positions, but they were by the men who were deployed overseas to fight the war. You probably heard the term Rosie the Riveter as represented female defense workers in World War II. Well, the Southern Pacific Railroad had their own term for the women that worked there during the war. They called themselves railroadettes, and they did not want to be called Rosies. As our journey together draws to an end, we want to thank you for joining us today. Most of the personnel operating our train today are volunteers at the California State Railroad Museum, which of course is part of the California State Park system. Besides staffing our trains, those volunteers also maintain our tracks, service our signals, do heavy maintenance on our railroad equipment, and keep trees and brush from fouling our tracks. Volunteer crew members undergo extensive yearly training for their positions, and they're subject to all the laws and Federal Railroad Administration regulations that govern all railroad employees. If you would like to be a volunteer on the Sac Southern Railroad or the California State Railroad Museum, please talk to your car attendant for more information. Car attendant can also describe the benefits of museum membership, including free train rides and museum admission. Our railroad is operated by our nonprofit, California State Railroad Museum Foundation. Don't forget to visit the museum, which is located just a short walk from our station. approaching Old Sacramento and our return to the Central Pacific Passenger Station. We hope that you enjoyed your trip today on the Sacramento Southern Railroad. We ask that you remain seated and that you take a good look around, make sure you have all your belongings. When the train does come to a stop, it'll take a few moments to uncouple the locomotive. Once that's completed, your car attendant will give you the signal to disembark from the train. Exit the same way that you entered or at your car attendant's direction, but please use the handrail and watch your step on the way down. Again, thank you for riding on the Sac Southern today, and I hope you enjoy the rest of your day. And please join us again soon. Happy rails!